Tonight on Let It Rip.
It goes against everything that any leader should be doing right now to protect every citizen's voice.
Michigan Democrats call new election reforms introduced by the GOP voter suppression, designed to keep minorities from voting. Yet Republicans say it's all about protecting election integrity. But first,
this is not about getting rid of the Second Amendment. It's simply about saying we need reasonable gun safety laws.
We see Democrats targeting law-abiding citizens. What actually works is targeting the bad guy.
New calls for gun control after 2 mass shootings this month. But we've seen this drama before. Many dead, followed by tears and prayers, and nothing changes. Time to let it rip. On the panel tonight, the former art teacher, former school board member, who's now the second highest ranking member of the state house, the Republican from Chesterfield Township, Representative Pamela Hornberger is here. Also with us, a conservative activist and executive member of the Oakland County Republican Party, Christina Caramo is back. And so is our resident psychiatrist who has treated both the victims and the perpetrators of mass violence, Dr. Gerald Shiner. And as always, anchor attorney Charlie Langton. But we begin tonight with award-winning journalist Ed Gordon, who has worked for just about every major network in the country and who now hosts 100, the Ed Gordon podcast. And Ed, in less than a year, we have marshaled our efforts to find vaccines against COVID-19, but we have repeatedly failed to find a way to stop the epidemic of mass shootings. What does that say about who we are?
I think it says that we have failed in that attempt. I don't think we're being honest with where America is. It's not necessarily only about curbing the idea of buying guns. It's curbing the idea of a gun culture that runs this country on both sides of the aisle. Let's be honest. You know, Hugh, you and I were talking before we went on air. I've been covering this since the early 90s. Mass shootings, when I started, were very atypical. If you heard about it and you were eating dinner, you'd push your plate away. You'd be so disturbed. Today, we don't even think about it. 7 days, and we should note that it's 4 or more killings at one time. 7 days, we saw 7 in 7 days. We don't even talk about Atlanta shootings right now because Colorado knocked it off the front pages. So at some point, we have to ask ourselves, is America really concerned about changing the culture of guns? And I would say at this point, and again, both sides of the aisle, I would say no.
Well, Dr. Shiner, during the pandemic, we went a year, it seemed, without a major incident, but now 2 mass shootings in less than a week. Why is this happening now?
Reasons, you. First, we see more violence, we see more suicides in spring. But we also know that up until a few months ago, when vaccinations became more readily available, we were unified behind a common cause to try to lift this virus, to try to address it, to try to find something to do to help each other. And now that we're in the home stretch, there's a sense of relief. The weather is good, people get more energized, and people who are suffering inside and who are mentally ill will attempt suicide more often, complete suicide more often, and we see a peak in acts of violence. There is a culture of guns, and guns are aggrandized. Look at what happened during the demonstrations at the Capitol, where the people who got the attention were the people who had bandoliers, long guns. Look at what happened in Washington on January 9th January 6th with all of the people storming with guns. There is a worship of guns and the right to own guns, where guns in the right hands may be safe, but you cannot legislate personal responsibility. And we've fallen down on screening people who are buying guns or who have access to guns. And I don't have to speak again about how dangerous they are. Just pick up a newspaper, as Ed said, or listen to a podcast or a radio, and we hear about it day after day after day.
State Rep Hornberger, the polls show that most voters want some kind of gun reform. The U.S. House has already approved a bill that would expand background checks for all gun sales. Do you have a problem with that?
Background checks for all gun sales? Well, when I got my CPL, I had to have a background check. So we already have measures in place in Michigan if you're purchasing a gun or if you're getting your concealed weapon permit. And I think it's interesting that we're talking about mass shootings and other shootings, but we constantly overlook the everyday shootings where people are murdered in Chicago and in our big cities constantly every day. And no one talks about that. But when we have a shooting where, 4 or 5 or more people are killed, then it becomes a major issue.
Are you saying it's not a major issue?
No, it is a major issue. It is a major issue, but no one's making a big deal out of it every day. We're not talking about the murders in Chicago every day.
But it's not just the murders. Most firearm deaths are suicides, and that becomes a public health issue. Firearm ownership increases the risk of dying by suicide in a household by tenfold. 10 times the risk. The time to do something is past, and we really need to address it. Background checks.
So is it
if your background check doesn't come through in 72 hours, then you get your gun anyway. The background check is
it's not just a firearm issue.
One at a time.
We don't have to talk about Chicago. I was in River Rouge this morning.
Thank you.
Shot dead in a car. There was a barricaded gunman in Sumter Township today. There was a barricaded gunman in Shelby Township. I think, Pam, that might be your district. I'm not sure. It's close.
Not yet.
There are barricaded gunmen. There are shootings today. We don't have to go to Chicago. We don't have to go anywhere. We go right here. I think Ed said it. There's a culture. I think when people would dispute, they take their gun out. And it's so easy to get a gun. I mean, it's sad. I go to Detroit. People have guns. I see them. They're there. We've got to change the culture. And honestly, I don't know how many gun laws, background checks, ammunition, whatever's. They're going to get the guns, and we got to tell and teach people. I don't know how to do it. I'm not smart enough. We got to teach people you have to value human life.
All right, Christina, let me bring you in. Christina, yes. The accused killer in Colorado, now charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. The confessed shooter in Georgia killed 8 people. Why allow people like that access to guns?
It's not about allowing people like that access to guns. The reason why we have our Second Amendment is to protect citizens from aspiring tyrants. Just like we see sociopaths, like in Georgia, like in Colorado, getting access to guns, we somehow think that a sociopath can't get into power. The issue is not guns. I totally disagree with the notion of a gun culture. It's a lack of morality in our society. We have embraced moral relativism, where human life is disposable as long as it benefits or feels good to me. We haven't had an issue of mass shooting until like the last 40 years. This is a recent phenomenon because we have embraced a relativistic culture. And so it is a danger when we start putting in the hands of the federal government to determine who can and cannot have weapons, as though that won't be abused. I do not celebrate the restrictive measures in Australia. For some reason, we ignore the fact that over the past 100 years, actually between the years 1900 and 1999, 260 million people were murdered by their government. So we can't just throw that off the table as though that's just a ridiculous possibility. The reason why we need to protect our gun rights is so we as the citizens will not be sheep waiting for a tyrant to rise to power. The answer is to not create laws that rob people of their constitutional rights off of a prediction of what will or what could happen. Look what happened to 100,000 Japanese in World War II.
The more guns we have, the more shootings we have. The more guns we have, the more mass shootings we have.
No, it's not about the guns, it's criminals.
And when President Bush outlawed assault weapons, mass shootings went down. When that law expired, they bounced back up fourfold. So it's not morality. It's government shepherding us, and it's government passing laws that ensure uncivility.
If people want to kill people, they'll do it.
That we continue it's these false narratives that we continue to roll around in that are the problems. If you watch local news in any city, it's ridiculous to say we don't talk about murders that happen singularly. Of course we do. If it bleeds, it leads. Every morning in every major city, you will see gun violence, singular gun violence every day. So Ms. Hornberger, I'm not sure where you're saying we're not talking about it. Secondly, when we talk about these false narratives of the government coming to get you and the boogeyman being in back of you, that's ridiculous in the sense of no one is asking you to give up every single gun. We're talking about assault weapons. We can't continue to wrap these assault weapons in the Constitution and in the flag and continue these false narratives that really have nothing to do with the major argument. And that is the sheer number of people that are being killed in this country by gun violence, whether it is by a Saturday night special, which ain't that special, or an assault rifle. There is a gun culture. There's a culture of violence. And if you cannot see that, I would say you're walking around with your eyes wide shut. period.
I think having your eyes wide shut is to think that your government couldn't kill you. I bet the Jewish people in Germany think their government wouldn't kill them. I bet
Christina,
the people in China thought Mao wouldn't kill them either. Of course, you do not. No, that is naive to think that a tyrant couldn't rise to power in the United States. If a sociopath can grab a gun and kill a bunch of people, why would we be naive enough to think that a sociopath couldn't occupy the White House? The reason why our Second Amendment exists is to protect you and me against aspiring tyrants. You guys somehow think that human nature has evolved to a point where people cannot be crazy.
In the grocery store in Colorado?
Absolutely, he was a tyrant. He was a tyrant because he felt he had the right to kill people. I believe that was a tyrant. You know what? I do not trust my government enough. No, I do not. You guys, as I mentioned before, 260 million people over a 100-year period got murdered by their government. That is why we have the Second Amendment. The issue is of morality. If I want to kill people, I will do it. We just had a guy in Dearborn stab 8 people. If someone wants to murder people, they will do it. And a criminal doesn't follow the law. So all you're doing is putting law-abiding citizens you're putting law-abiding citizens in danger. That's all you're doing. Criminals will get a weapon regardless. That's the nature of a criminal.
You know, but here's the problem.
True. These are not sociopaths.
A law-abiding citizen can become a criminal by simply killing somebody. And that's the problem, too. This man in Colorado, the man in Georgia, both of them may have legally bought their guns. They were not criminals when they purchased the weapons. They were criminals when they pulled the trigger to kill innocent people. That is the problem. And how do you keep those guns, those weapons, out of the hands of people like that? We can do it if we put our minds to it. Go ahead.
Red flag laws, background checks.
Exist in Colorado and it didn't work.
And
they struck down an assault rifle ban. They struck down an assault rifle ban 10 days before this kid bought his gun. If that had been in effect, he may not have been able to perpetrate this. You don't know. You can shake your head and you can
realize
everything else but gun control.
And realize too that a law may not stop every incident. Go ahead.
Blame mental health, blame morality. If we had better controls and if we had better scrutiny for people who wanted to buy guns, if you want to buy a car, you have to register your car. If you want to vote, you have to register to vote. All of a sudden, if you want to buy a gun, you can't put your name down. You can't wait 72 hours and have a cooling off period.
Hey, what are you talking about?
And if your background check isn't in 72 hours, you get your gun in Michigan. And if it doesn't come in, you get it anyway. And the FBI can't keep up with 72-hour checks. Grow up and get real and tell the truth. Let the people know the truth, not just
the truth. I had to go through a process to protect my family, to exercise my constitutional right to protect me and my family.
From who?
From anyone.
You people don't break in people's homes.
It's my right. It's my right to protect my family.
Who's going to come and hurt your family? Grow up.
You act as though people don't break in people's homes. Doctor, you have
right. Hey, guys, rights are in the Constitution. But wait a minute. But those rights are not without responsibility. We all agree to that, don't we?
I'm a responsible, trained gun owner.
Bottom line. All right. Look, we got to end it right there. We will have this discussion again, sadly, after another mass shooting in this country. Stay with us. All right, coming up on Let It Rip, the fight over voting rights in Michigan. Republicans proposing new restrictions on how, when, and where you can vote. Democrats call it voter suppression. The GOP calls it an issue of election integrity. You'll hear from both sides as Let It Rip continues. Welcome back to Let It Rip. With us now are two of the state's Democratic leaders, Senators Adam Ollier from Detroit and Jeremy Moss from Southfield. You've already met Pamela, Christina, Charlie. So, Jeremy, let's begin with you because the GOP says it's proposing something that's common sense reform to be sure that election integrity is maintained and that nobody cheats the system. What's the problem you have with that?
Well, it's based on this premise that there's a problem with our elections currently, which is not true. And so they're pushing forward 39 bills, an incredible amount of bills that suppress the vote and institute restricted access to absentee voting, institute restricted access to ballot drop-off boxes, institute restricted access to use federal funding for election administration. And nobody asked for this. Clerks didn't ask for this, and voters didn't ask for this. Quite the contrary. The last time we had a ballot proposal dealing with voter rights, in 2018 to promote access to voting, to remove these barriers for voting. Some 67% of Michiganders supported that. And you don't get 67% with Democrats only. This is a Republican and Democratic effort from the citizens to promote voting, to reduce barriers. And it's only legislative Republicans in Lansing that are trying to dismantle those efforts.
But Pamela, I understand that there are some bipartisan efforts also underway in the State House.
State House, earlier this month, Representative Bolin, who's heading up our Ethics and Elections Committee, they passed out some bills to update the qualified voter files. So if someone has a placeholder birth date, so, something that says they're 121 years old, or, something like that, or if they haven't voted since November of 2000, they would be removed from the voter files. And then there are some things that help county clerks out with training and making sure they're up to date in their training and their training requirements, also with campaign finance statements and lobby reforms. And then a bill that would allow townships in local cities to expand the size of their election precincts, which is helpful because we know more people are absentee voting. So we don't need as many precincts, in-person voting precincts. So some pretty much common sense election reforms that we put in place, and they are bipartisan. So I'm not privy to all of the information, as Senator Moss was talking about, that came out of the Senate. I just started reading through it. There's 39 bills, so it's a lot to digest. But I can speak to what we were working on in the House, and I'm pretty proud of that, and I'm pretty proud of it being bipartisan.
Well, Senator Ollier, there seems to be a lot of concern among GOP members of the Senate that, frankly, the system is rigged. You hear constant complaints about dead people voting who shouldn't even be allowed to vote because they don't live in the state. You also hear complaints of secret ballots being dropped off in the middle of the night. How do you address those concerns?
Really simply, you can look at facts. So you all hear all these whispers about people talking about things, but you never see them provide any facts. They like to be the party of law and order and to call people in and adjudicate those things. As a matter of fact, today, they were like, hey, let's give any prosecutor who wants to investigate the governor more money. You notice they haven't asked a single prosecutor. There's no prosecutor in the state. There's no person in the state who's like, hey, here is a dead person that voted. Here is a person who was on the qualified voter file who lives in some other state who's actually voting in these elections. All this stuff is nonsense. We do know that they're common sense reforms, and they're simple things like, hey, we should give clerks more time to actually process ballots. But when we did that, Senate leadership last year said it'd be okay if they didn't know who won the election on election night, because then they could sensibly start to say that it was stolen, knowing that it was going to take forever to count because there were thousands of ballots that needed to be counted, mine among them, right? We could make it easier for military and service members who are serving overseas and their spouses and dependents to vote. That's where we see a problem. Those are the ballots that come in the last and take the longest to count. But no, we're not doing that because, God forbid, service members would be able to vote. I mean, there are lots of common sense reforms. They just aren't being addressed here. They like to say that they're simple things like tightening up the system and doing all those kind of little things. But those little things make it a little bit more difficult. I'm a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. I'm Native American. My nation wants me to vote. So they send me a prepaid package and it says, hey, all I have to do is fill it out and send it back. I don't have to pay for postage. I don't have to go to stamp. All I have to do is put it back in the mail because they actually want me to vote. Republicans don't want that. They don't want people to vote. And so every chance they get, they try and make it more difficult. I mean, it's simple. I was one of those people who pre-registered to vote when I was 17 years old because I turned 18 in college. And I couldn't vote in Michigan because I registered to vote not in person because I was not yet 18. And so I had to register to vote in New York to vote in my first election because in Michigan, we make it hard for people who want to vote to vote. And that's what these bills do.
No, this is part of an assumptive demonization campaign. For starters, we have 2 federal laws to protect service members and overseas American voters. We have 2 federal laws to protect them. Election security is an issue of national security, and an unsecure election is a form of voter suppression. These common sense reforms are there to make sure that only legal votes are counted and legal votes are not diluted by fraudulent votes. For one, we just saw Secretary Jocelyn Benson ask clerks to delete election data December 7th, when that's a violation of election law, where you're supposed to keep that data for 22 months. It makes no sense. In fact, in February, Secretary Benson said she's going to start the process of removing over 170,000 people from the qualified voter file. Why were those people on the qualified voter file prior to the November election? Also, why is it so ridiculous to ask for security at the drop boxes? The thing about it is simply asking for secure elections is not an attempt to suppress anybody's vote. And when people suggest that, it is just simply a scapegoat to allow corruptions to be prevalent in our elections. We want to make sure that every American citizen has access to vote. We are not looking, no, it's not funny. It's horrible, because this is an issue of national security. It's not a lie. You're being dishonest. You're just simply saying it's a lie without engaging actually any of the points I have made. All you do is demonize. It's like this. It's an issue of our liberty. That's the point. It's not about voter suppression.
But the premise that our elections were insecure is absolutely false. And as soon as the Saturday after the last election day, Republicans in the legislature began a mission to look for voter fraud. And they had countless oversight hearings in the House and Senate. Some of them were a circus that invited Rudy Giuliani and his crew in, and they couldn't find one credible claim of criminal fraud in our election. And if they did, they could have sent it to the Attorney General or law enforcement to investigate, and they couldn't. It didn't exist.
Wait a minute. That is not true. First of all, I was a poll challenger at the TCF Center. So, I mean, I'm not saying you're trying to accuse me of lying, but I know things that I saw that were grossly improper. The ballots were being moved around. No. First of all, I'm talking. First of all, I was a poll challenger at the TCF Center, and ballots were being moved around like bushels of apples. There was no chain of custody for those ballots. Asking for accountability is a very reasonable proposition. To say why would Jocelyn Benson ask the clerks around Michigan to delete election material before December 7th? There is no logical reason to do that. And you guys are ignoring the Antrim County case where they say, oh, it was just a clerk update. No. That doesn't make sense. That unless you do a correct update, the ballots will be counted to the wrong person. So these are very reasonable questions that every Michigander should be concerned about. We want to make sure that both are accessible and secure. You don't have to deny accessibility to get security. You need both.
Charlie, let me hear you.
But Christina, though, seriously, we had about 50 lawsuits challenging these things. We had judges look at this thing. We had the rule of evidence, every single lawsuit, and not one ruled in the favor that there was election fraud. Not one. So what do you say to
the Antrim County case is still being litigated.
And yet still the Antrim County Board of County Canvassers certified the election along with all 83 counties here in the state of Michigan. And the State Board of Canvassers certified the election. And the Michigan Supreme Court threw out these frivolous challenges. And the U.S. Supreme Court wouldn't take up these challenges.
No, the cases were thrown out on standing, not merit. You're ignoring that fact. Throwing a case out on standing instead of merit is huge. That doesn't mean the cases lack merit.
We also just had Attorney Sidney Powell, one of Trump's biggest supporters, say that don't sue me. I'm not guilty of anything because no reasonable person would believe the lies I've been telling.
And it's the Michigan Senate Republicans. And it's the Michigan Senate Republicans who are admitting that they're not reasonable people because they're introducing these voter suppression bills.
So the Michigan Senate Republicans said that they're not reasonable. No, they submitted legislation. They submitted legislations to have secure elections. Why are you guys so afraid of secure elections?
We have a secure election, and I'm not afraid of it.
So you guys have ran around saying that asking for ID is racist. That's the new Democratic talking point: is asking for voter ID. Is racist. Okay. You guys have thrown out some of the most ridiculous things. And people have said that.
Okay, we're running out of time. We're running out of time. One last comment. IDs should be a reasonable requirement for every voter. No problem. But we must learn to have faith in our elections, and we must learn to accept the results. If you want to win, you simply have to convince more voters. That's the solution.